and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we start with some sad news in the headlines. Veteran lesbian civil rights attorney and activist Joan Gibbs has died at age 70.
A special favorite of ours, so we're going to start the show with a little tribute to her and a little remembrance of her on this show. News from Oklahoma, where the medical examiner said Nex Benedict took his own life. Reactions from Owasso, Oklahoma to the White House.
GLSEN's Day of Silence has gotten a more militant name.
Well, I've rethought the silence business. Some mixed decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court.
DeSantis is in trouble with the Christian right for settling that lawsuit over Don't Say Gay.
I love that he can't do anything right. Alabama librarians have been fired for refusing to get rid of LGBTQ books.
The NCAA is being sued to halt inclusion of trans women in women's sports.
Staten Island, New York, finally got an inclusive St. Patrick's Day parade.
It actually happened.
Yep.
And Wayne Brady defines pansexual for us.
It's quite heartwarming. LGBTQ Ukrainians are being brutalized by Russian soldiers.
And the Greek Orthodox Church is excommunicating lawmakers who legalized same-sex marriage.
So one of the pillars of our community and many other communities was civil rights attorney Joan Gibbs, yes, who came, although she was born in Harlem, was raised in a tiny little town in North Carolina, but grew up with a great sense of justice and the need to do something about it, and devoted her life to that, and did it in so many different venues in the civil rights movement, in the AIDS activist movement. She was a great stalwart with ACT UP, and of course a lesbian activist, and appeared on this show several times.
Well, she devoted her entire legal career to the practice of constitutional and civil rights law, focused on racial justice litigation, voting rights, and immigration. And of course, she was a legal observer for all those ACT UP and LGBTQ rights demonstrations.
And defended us in many of the arrest scenarios.
And she was also a writer, an editor, and a publisher. She was general counsel for the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College at the time of her death, longtime staff attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights, but also at the ACLU, Women's Rights Project.
She died at age 70. Her official cause of death has not been announced yet, but she was believed to have had heart problems for a while and to have died at home of a heart attack. Alone, I'm sorry to say, although beloved by many, many, many people.
She dreamed up the first conference for third world lesbian writers. She was active with Salsa Soul Sisters in the 70s. Yep. She was part of the Azalea Collective of third world lesbians that created a literary magazine.
So, as I say, we had her on our show several times as a legal expert talking about whatever issue was at the top of the news, but with an iconoclastic point of view. But we want to show you a clip of her on the show with Evan Wolfson and James Essex, prominent attorneys for the LGBTQ community from Lambda Legal and the ACLU, and Freedom to Marry was eventually Evan's group. And we had on this roundtable for an hour, I think, for the whole show.
Yes, this was after the Obergefell decision in 2015, when same-sex marriage was enacted by the Supreme Court.
Yes. So let's take a look at what Joan had to say that day. Joan?
Well, you know, I was one of those people who, in the beginning, did not feel that this was the issue that we should be pressing. and never really got involved in the marriage equality movement because I was involved in other issues which I felt were more pressing. Nevertheless, that said, I changed my opinion so that I was in California when the Proposition 8 decision came down and was following the reactions. I went to the demonstrations. And so I realized, I said that, you know, I guess the, just the lesbian in me said, well, you know, and, you know, the way they're attacking them, you know, this is outrageous. How dare you attack somebody just for simply wanting to get married, you know? So, congratulations.
Well, thank you to all of us.
Now, and how I felt about it, you know, I wasn't surprised because, you know, the Constitution litigation is the thing I focused in for all of my career. I mean, in light of loving and all those decisions,
Right.
I mean, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I thought that, you know, that you would win, but I thought it might be 6, though. But it wasn't.
Now you're getting greedy.
No. And as to the decision itself, I hope we get into it.
Yes.
I thought that Justice Kennedy, I don't know, I think I would have loved him to have stuck more closely to the Equal Protection Clause, because, you know, then it would be like, you know, after Brown versus Board of Education, you know, the Supreme Court in a series of procuring decisions, like liquidated all of the Jim Crow laws. I mean, it took the movement to make it real, but they did.
A huge loss, far too soon. I agree with her. I wanted more of an equal protection emphasis from the Supreme Court. But what this also shows is her open mind to everything and her willingness to listen and consider and change her mind when she thought it was appropriate. She was always fascinating to listen to and talk to. And as I say, a great help to many movements and a real hero, and just really sad to have lost her. It was a big shock when her death was announced last week.
Especially to people our age.
Who are older.
Yes.
I always feel it's a victory when I've survived a little longer.
Right. Well, let's talk about another sad case, the case of Nex Benedict in Oklahoma, 16 years old. The autopsy says that Nex took his own life, ODing on
Benadryl and Prozac.
Okay. Nex was the frequent target of
Seems unlikely.
bullying at school. And as a non-binary kid from Oklahoma, the government, especially the state school superintendent, Ryan Walters, who shed some crocodile tears over Nex's death, followed by this. Here's what Ryan Walters then said. In this statement about Nex's death, the LGBT groups pushing a false narrative are one of the biggest threats to democracy, and I remain more than ever committed to never backing down from a woke mob. To say this in the context, it's just like it's disgusting, and that's what leads to more violence.
So there was a fight at school. Nex was attacked by 3 girls. Turns out they were all in school suspension, but with no supervision. They were all supposed to be, in some kind of detention, and yet they had this confrontation. So then Nex has his head beat against the floor, taken to the hospital, eventually released, sent home, wakes up the next morning, headaches, eventually eyes rolling back in his head, ends up back in the hospital and dies. So the first thing was the medical examiner or the cops or someone saying, well, this wasn't a result of trauma. Yeah. Really? His head is beat against the floor. You don't think he might have had at least a little concussion, a little problem?
Right.
But now the preliminary report is overdose on these pills, which he was taking regularly. And
there needs to be an independent autopsy.
We are waiting for, yes, there does need to be an independent autopsy. We're waiting for the final complete report from the medical examiner. But to say that he would have OD'd on Prozac and Benadryl just seems, you'd have to take like 1,000 of each of them. Now, I am not a doctor, and viewers may correct me on that. Please do. But it just seems unlikely. And to not take into account this head beating And even if he did take the pills himself
Right.
deliberately, could it not have been influenced by the fact that he's been bullied for years
Of
and
course.
that he was just beaten up and was in terrible shape?
Well, students and parents at Owasso High School held a vigil for Nex, and we do have a video report on that.
So the community, I love that how much the community's come together. I've been out here since about a little before 10 this morning, and it was packed with people. Unfortunately, some had to leave earlier, which is fine. Everyone's got prior engagements, and it's just been really moving.
I am here to let the kids know that they are loved and that they are supported, and that we care about them. I think that with the laws that have been, passed, that a lot of students feel like they're not able to be themselves. And I know that, I have a 16-year-old and she's scared and, I had to pull her out of, school, and she's homeschooled now because she's concerned about what the future holds for her in this state.
And one of those signs that one of the kids was holding up said, "We are not filth," because an Oklahoma legislature said, we don't want this filth in Oklahoma.
A lot of bullying in that school and elsewhere in other schools in Oklahoma.
But President Joe Biden took a different perspective on this, and we're going to read the statement that he issued this week.
He did, and you can, yes, there he is. Jill and I are heartbroken by the recent loss of Nex Benedict. Every young person deserves to have the fundamental right and freedom to be who they are and feel safe and supported at school and in their communities. Nex Benedict, a kid who just wanted to be accepted, should still be here with us today.
Non-binary and transgender people are some of the bravest Americans I know, but nobody should have to be brave just to be themselves. In memory of Nex, we must all recommit to our work to end discrimination and address the suicide crisis impacting too many non-binary and transgender children. Bullying is hurtful and cruel, and no one should have to face the bullying that Nex did. Parents and schools must take reports of bullying seriously. My prayers are with Nex's family, friends, and all who love them, and to all LGBTQI plus Americans for whom this tragedy feels so personal. Know this: I will always have your back.
To LGBTQI plus young people across the country, you are loved exactly as you are. If you're feeling overwhelmed or alone, you can call or text 988, the National Crisis Hotline, and dial the number 3 to talk to a counselor who has been specifically trained to support LGBTQI plus youth. That's 988 push 3.
Now that the primaries are resolved, it sounds like it would probably be better to have him as president for another term than the previous guy, who has not said anything about this.
Well, yeah, so who knows what he thinks? Maybe he'll tell us.
All right.
Yeah, terrible.
And then, there was a public hearing at the Owasso Owasso Schools, the school district, and a lesbian mom got up and told that board what for.
I am a proud lesbian mother. My personal experience that I've dealt with bullying with my own teenage son through Owasso since last year of moving here. Where do I begin? I'm gonna try to do this. Where do I begin? Him coming home telling me he was called a fag today, that he was called gay for having an earring, even being degraded by another teen, and the teacher knew but didn't report anything to the principal or myself, yet told that kid's parents. This certain kid has been telling my son to call him daddy, that my child was his bitch. To me, that's something I should know. Also, no repercussions for the bully. My child doesn't fit the social norm because he wants to just be himself. The bullying still continues. Since speaking up about our experiences, so many other parents and people have stepped up with stories that I can't even imagine, including of a first grader at Bailey that she has expressed her daughter has been tormented, bruises, scratches, and what does the school do? They victim blame her. Our children are hurting. They are all screaming for help. When will you hear them? I don't want another beautiful soul taken too soon. There has to be a change. Just because these children do not fit your social norm of others does not mean that their life is any less than yours. And also, I have a question. This fight took place, and those students were in school suspension. Where was the supervision? That's what scares me to send my kid to school, is that they were in school suspension and nothing was done. Nothing. Nothing. It should have never happened.
It should have never happened. And unless you think this is limited to Oklahoma or red states, a Manhattan school board, now these are advisory school councils, Manhattan, liberal Manhattan, they get elected by the parents. They are taking up a resolution as we sit here. They're taking it up tonight. They have 2 members of the board who are affiliated with Moms for Liberty, who got elected. And it's basically an anti-trans resolution that says that we're going to form a committee to see how we're dealing with gender issues in the schools. But these members are openly anti-trans. And I looked up this board. Some of the good people on the board tried to pass a pro-LGBT protect the kids thing, and they couldn't get it passed. It just didn't pass. So it's, we don't pay attention to these local little elections, but parents out there, speak up.
Look, we all have busy lives. This is a lot to deal with on all these details. But here's the thing. Moms for Liberty is paying attention to all of this, and they are getting people elected all over the country. And
although we beat most of their candidates, on average.
We beat a lot of them, but there are people, look, we've talked for years about Republicans taking over state legislatures, and they know to start from the grassroots and rise up. And that's how we end up with some of these monster candidates. We're going to talk about the Ohio guy. But they pay attention. There are enough of them paying attention that because they know these seats are important.
Now, we have a bunch of other school stories, but should we give a little of the national Supreme Court stuff?
Well,
news?
I was going to
Go ahead.
I was going to talk about GLSEN, which was originally the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. I think they've redefined those initials. Sorry if I'm not up to date on that. But they, for a couple of decades, have been running the Day of Silence as a protest for these issues in schools and urging students to stay silent for a day as a sign of protest against bullying, against these bad laws and bad policies. And this year they have decided to change. They have said enough of the silence. We are instead going to do the day of Rise Up, Take Action. And that's going to be Friday, April 12th. And I think that's an important change that they're making.
Let's stick with the school issues. In
Yes.
Florida, the Christian Family Coalition is furious with Governor DeSantis for settling that lawsuit against his Don't Say Gay law that still bans instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity, but that concedes that sexual orientation and gender identity can be discussed as long as it's not part of formal instruction. It allows gay-straight alliances, which are protected by federal law, by the way, but that the Christian group says are nothing but indoctrination and sexualizing children's groups. They also hate the idea that heterosexuality cannot be taught as superior to homosexuality. They're working on a legislative package to undo that settlement. But, this year, 95% of the anti-LGBTQ bills failed in the Florida legislature because they're getting tired of it.
Well, as long as you mention Moms for Liberty and their excesses, there's a Moms for Liberty chapter that says that, these wonderful people who've gone out in the streets and offered free mom hugs at parades or events. Now Moms for Liberty is saying, watch out, they might be a groomer.
Yes, grooming you for love.
Yeah.
By the way, the NAACP is urging black athletes to avoid Florida schools amid the attack on DEI programs. And also, DeSantis' Stop Woke Act has been blocked by now 4 federal judges, including 2 Trump appointees.
In California, we did succeed in recalling 2 anti-LGBTQ school board members. in what, Orange?
The city of Orange in Orange County.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have pictures of them actually.
There's one.
There's one. I have their name.
And there's the other.
Rick Ledesma, and he had enacted a ban on rainbow flags outside school buildings. They're still allowed inside. And the other one.
Bad woman.
Bad woman. Yes. Okay.
That's what we'll call her. Bad
I have her
woman.
down here somewhere.
And in Pennsylvania, a pro-LGBTQ teacher, Andrew Burgess, who was suspended for helping trans students and suing the bad board.
Well, he went to the EEOC instead of going to the school board because he says you're not doing anything about it.
And he was suspended for that.
Yeah.
You now lose your job if you complain. Well, he got his job back and $100,000 when the Central Bucks Pennsylvania School Board flipped from right-wingers to Democrats.
And there's the kids out there protesting on his behalf.
Yep.
In Alabama, the city of Orange Beach settled 2 lawsuits alleging anti-LGBTQ discrimination by former city employees for a total of almost $300,000. They said there was pervasive anti-LGBTQ and sexually charged atmosphere at the recreation department under the director there and his wife, and that the mayor and council let it go on forever.
But in Prattville, Alabama, the library board has fired the director and some staff for refusing to remove LGBTQ books from the library shelves. I love the civil disobedience, and there are protesters.
Well, the thing is, they fired the director, and then the rest of the staff went out and protested, and they said, "You're all fired."
Yes. Well, let's just close down the library.
Well, they don't want people reading books.
No. In New York City, on Staten Island, a passerby noticed that outside the Eltingville public school, PS 55 on Staten Island, there were garbage cans or dumpsters full of new books. And when they looked more closely, they saw that they were books about race and LGBTQ people and issues and immigration. And they still had rejection notes on them, little Post-it notes, as you saw in that picture, saying not approved. And they were all just trashed.
Well, listen, in the early days of me writing for the Gay City News, not that long ago, I would find whole piles of them in trash cans on the corner.
Oh, yes.
In Georgia, the state Senate passed a bill banning state libraries from using public or private funds from purchasing materials from the American Library Association, accusing it of being a far-left indoctrination group.
And in Utah, it has been revealed that BYU, Brigham Young University, has now a mandatory course for its freshmen and transfer students, UNIV, University 101, which includes on its mandatory reading list the infamous 2021 musket fire speech by a Latter-day Saints official.
A former president of the school, Jeffrey Holland. And it includes, it condemned the criticism of the Mormon faith, including the doctrine of the family and defending marriage as the union of a man and a woman. And about homosexuality, he said, "We have to be careful that love and empathy do not get interpreted as condoning and advocacy." So the LGBTQ group at the school says, this breeds violence. You got to stop this.
I'm sorry, I was looking ahead. The Georgia story you just did, was that about teachers suing Cobb County?
No.
Okay, well, teachers are suing Cobb County in Georgia because they have laws against teaching race, LGBTQ, any educational issues, and the teachers are suing because they say the laws are too vague and are just scaring teachers away from going anywhere near these subjects.
That's the idea.
Exactly. But the teachers are suing, which is a much better idea.
Well, speaking of suing, a group of female athletes, including anti-trans swimmer Riley Gaines. They're suing the NCAA for letting trans women compete with them, claiming it's a violation of Title IX. They want a ban on trans women and any wins by trans women in meets rescinded.
A violation of Title IX. That's an interesting twisting.
And then we'll
of
go
the,
back to Nassau County,
yeah.
the fight over trans athletes. Caitlyn Jenner, who I don't like to talk about, but there she is standing with the anti-trans Republican County Executive Bruce Blakeman. Jenner citing an isolated incident in North Carolina where a trans volleyball player spiked a ball and caused an injury. They couldn't come up with any examples in Nassau County. Jenner said that trans women, they keep saying, oh, I'm a real woman. And I'm going, no, you're not.
She says, I've changed everything, my driver's license,
Yeah.
my records, my this, my that, but I know I'm not.
Just,
Please.
go away.
Yes, please. All right. I think we've hit the educational
Yes,
stories.
I think so. In the elections, yes, and this week in the Ohio primary, the Trump-backed candidate, what's his name?
Bernie Moreno,
got
something.
51% of the vote in a three-way race. But during the campaign, he's going to face Democrat Sherrod Brown, who's very,
I adore Sherrod
endangered.
Brown.
We love him.
Oh my God!
I wish
he's
he
the
would
best.
run for president.
Well, he has, but he only lasted about 5 seconds.
But
He'd be the best.
Anyway, this guy Bernie faced gay sex rumors down the stretch. He was linked to a profile on a gay hookup website.
10 years ago, I think.
Well, he's a far-right candidate who opposes reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights. Yes, in 2008, someone used his email address to make an account for men for one-on-one sex on the casual sex website Adult Friend Finder.
He says it was someone who did that to mess with him.
Hi, looking for young guys to have fun with while traveling. His username was Nardo19672, a reference to his first name, Bernardo.
Well,
And give his birth date as February 1967. There's a lot of detail here.
Yes, exactly. So far he has survived this horrendous news. The voters voted for him, but the hope is that he's one of these Republican candidates who's so far right that Sherrod Brown can actually beat him in a Republican voting state.
The Democrats spent millions of dollars to make him the candidate.
Well, Claire McCaskill invented that years ago when she pumped up a far-right opponent and then beat him in the race, and that's what Adam Schiff has just done in California, to not have Katie Porter as his opponent.
Well, speaking of adult websites, the Fifth Circuit of Court of Appeals upheld a Texas law requiring those age verification systems on porn sites. So Texans, you can no longer get Pornhub in Texas anymore.
But you can maybe go to a drag show or not. The Supreme Court of the United States has refused the plea from West Texas A&M University students for relief from the school's ban on a fundraising PG drag show to raise awareness and prevent suicide.
The president of the university cited religious texts in stopping the show last year, calling drag divisive, demoralizing misogyny. The case started with the MAGA judge, Matthew Kacsmaryk.
It's going back to the Fifth Circuit, so I doubt they're going to get the drag. Why don't they do it off campus?
Well, sure. But I mean, by the way, this whole business of going to this Judge Matthew, who, made the national ban on the abortion pill and everything else, the federal judgeships are now saying we're going to stop this court shopping.
Yes, they're going to have a more random judge selection. You can't just go to this one court in Texas to get all your favorite decisions, which has worked very well for the right wing and really should have been stopped long before.
And the Supreme Court also rejected an appeal from an Indiana Christian couple who lost custody of their trans teen. The court, without comment, let stand a decision that removed the teen from their custody because of the medical necessity of addressing the teen's eating disorder. Indiana court also said the custody dispute is no longer relevant because the teen is they were taken from the home when they were 16, but now they're an adult. But the couple abused the child over their trans identity, and the parents were told at one point, "Don't discuss transgenderism, or you could trigger the eating disorder." And they said, "Our religious rights to abuse our child have been violated."
Exactly. Well, turning to another topic.
One more thing on the Supreme Court. There's now a
Yes.
movement to get Sonia Sotomayor at 70 to step down while Biden is still president this year. Ruth Bader Ginsburg wouldn't do it. Because you get it,
we may not control the Senate after November.
That's right. So, exactly. And the Senate's not going to confirm liberal judges, even if Biden gets reelected. So, Sonia, think about it, because if either the Senate goes, and we're likely to lose the Senate.
I'm not willing to consider 70-year-olds disqualified yet.
Not
Much as
disqualified,
I'd like to
but
retire.
40 or 50 is much better. Because
Yes.
you get to serve
Yeah,
for a
but,
lot longer. They
Mitch-
do it all the time.
Mitch McConnell will hold it up in some
He can't.
way.
No, you can't.
Well,
you can't.
Joe Manchin will hold it up.
Let's-
Kirsten Sinema will
Let's
hold it up.
get real.
I'm real.
I love her. I think she's terrific,
Yes,
by the way.
not ready to lose her. But we have not lost Sean Patrick Maloney, who, after his congressional loss, has now finally been confirmed as ambassador to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris.
The vote was 63 to 31. 16 Republican attorneys general are threatening to sue Maine if it passes a state law shielding providers of gender-affirming care and abortion from out-of-state legal action. Now, 17 states and D.C. already have these shield laws. 11 and D.C. covered gender-affirming care.
And the libs of TikTok are active back in Alabama. We're returning to Alabama. A parent noticed that the space camp at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, which we've heard about for years, has a transgender employee. Freaked out, was going to send his daughter there, but now that there is a trans woman working with the kids at Space Camp, is losing his mind and objecting. The libs of TikTok have jumped on this, and now there's this huge uproar in Huntsville about employees. Luckily, the director of the Space Center has said, get over yourselves. We have a very diverse workforce here, and it does great, and we're not backing down to you.
Not to tempt the fates, but are you disappointed that libs of TikTok haven't discovered us?
What is there to object to?
All right. Well, of course, what they're concerned about is that we're taking over. The new Gallup poll says 29% of women ages 18 to 26 identify as LGBTQ, 21% bisexual, and 5% lesbian. A total of 7.6% of U.S. adults now identify as LGBTQ, which is more than double since Gallup started asking the questions in 2012.
Well, we've always known this and knew that it was just a question not of more LGBTQI plus people, but simply people being willing to identify as such. And so this was a survey of 12,000 people in the U.S., 18 and over, and the bottom line figure is 7.6% LGBTQ. With vastly higher numbers among the younger than the older. They did say that, I have twice as many women as men in this. Am I looking at the...
I don't know. 1 in 6 of those who identify as gay or lesbian.
Oh, younger people, more
Right.
women are out. Older, more men are out. That makes sense.
But the big thing is that, of these, 60% are identifying as bisexual. But we are getting up towards the 10% overall figure.
At the risk of boring the audience, I will again quote you for the statement you don't remember. 10% of the population exclusively heterosexual, 10% exclusively homosexual, 80% some mixture of whatever.
That's just my experience.
So if we're your experience, so if 60% of these figures are identifying as bisexual, that would make sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's give them some good news.
I think that was good news.
Yes, it is.
Let's give them some good news from the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, which have announced that they are broadening IVF eligibility for singles and gay couples, but mostly for those who are infertile because of military service for one reason or
And
another.
the president did this massive,
Investment in women's health.
Exactly.
Yes.
On Staten Island, it still has one St. Patrick's Day parade that still excludes LGBT groups, but this past Sunday, thanks to Mayor Adams, actually, they finally have an inclusive one. And the Pride Center of Staten Island, there they are, and other LGBT Q groups were able to march and be cheered on by supporters. And many elected officials were there who boycott the other parade. That included the mayor, Attorney General Tish James, State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, and Republican Congress member Nicole Maliotakis, who has yet to come out herself, but she was there for this parade.
Come on, Nicole.
Come on, Nicole. You can do it.
It was a lovely day.
Yeah. Well, the day before, a gay Irish group continued to march in the Fifth Avenue St. Patrick's Day Parade. We have a picture. I was with Lavender and Green this year. Having protested for 25 years, I feel obligated to go. We're down to about 25 people at this point.
As soon as they made it legal, I stopped showing up. I got arrested a lot protesting.
You did.
Once
we were
they
very
did it-
sad having lost Malachi McCarty, who led us last year, but there was Randy Wicker, 86, a gay activist since the late 1950s, joining us. So think about joining us next year. It's a nice walk down Fifth Avenue.
Again, it was
people
a
cheer for you.
Gorgeous day.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. All right. Now, some sadder news about various.
Oh, by the way, yes. We're going to crime news.
Yeah.
The alleged anti-gay killer of Walt Lay, Deck Radford, is being held in jail pending trial. His attorney asked for $50K in bail, but was denied. The state's attorney, Susie Lopez, said crimes of hate are some of the clearest dangers to our community and are a threat to every citizen of the county. This defendant's actions led to the senseless death of a man who was simply trying to enjoy a morning at his dog park. We will work tirelessly to hold him to account.
Well, the killer is such an overt liar that.
If I killed somebody, I might tell some lies too, but that's what he did, because
He
there were no
did.
witnesses.
Yes.
But people did witness his homophobia
Yes.
and threatening this man.
Yeah. Now, stranger case of also in Florida. Let's stick there for a moment.
Yes.
In Orlando. Professor at a Baptist university, Averett University, was found dead. He was attending a conference and was found dead in a bathhouse.
Yes, his name is. He had been reported missing, and the cause of death has not been determined. This is a conservative Baptist university in
Yeah.
Danville, Virginia.
Yeah. An update on a case of.
Danville, Virginia. Yeah, go ahead.
We told you last year about the murder of a trans woman in Detroit, Ashia Davis. They have now arrested a young man, Carlos Lamar Scotland, 18 years old, 17 when the murder was committed. Arrested him for the June 23 murder of Ashia Davis.
And then trans woman Reina Hernandez, we have a picture, murdered by her partner, a 54-year-old Latina trans woman, a salon owner from Renton in Seattle, who had been missing for several weeks, but the body was found in Mexicali on March 8th, signs of torture. This was her partner of 30 years.
Very brutal. Kidnapped, brutally murdered, left by a cemetery in Mexicali.
He is under arrest.
Yeah.
And then a trans man, Righteous Torrance Hill, murdered by his cousin. Now, he's a black trans man, also a salon owner, a barbershop, and 35 years old, also known as Chevy and TK. In his shop, Evolution, He sought to create a haven where the barbershop experience transcended into a space of safety and affirmation for young black queer individuals. Murdered on February 29th, shot multiple times. It turns out by a young man, Jalen Hill, who he had been trying to help all his life.
Well, because the cousin evidently suffered from mental illness, which of course could be a factor in this murder.
And Jalen is currently a fugitive, deeply mourned.
Yes.
All right.
And then, oh my God, the end to a long and gruesome story. Many of you are old enough to remember Andrew Crispo. Certainly I am. There he is on the cover of New York Magazine 40 years ago. He was, oh my God, this was such a huge story in the 80s. He was an art dealer who was into S&M, was accused of 2 murders. One murder and 1 kidnapping.
Well, the murder of a gay man, Igor Vesti, 26, in
Yes.
1985.
Whose head basically was found with a hood over it. His body had been thrown in the woods and animals had devoured it.
Well, so somebody
The
else
hood protected the head.
somebody else gets convicted of this crime, Bernard Lagueros. But
And
he
it says-
says, Crispo ordered me to shoot him in the back.
They were right there in the back of the head, I think. Or whatever.
Crispo gets off,
Yes.
so to speak.
It was an unbelievable scandal for weeks and weeks and weeks.
The 2 of them were also indicted for the 1984 kidnapping and torture of a 26-year-old bartender
Yes.
named Mark Leslie. And Lagueros pleaded guilty. Crispo was acquitted, convincing the jury it was consensual.
He was eventually sent to jail, like Al Capone, for tax evasion. But this was headlines for years in New York City. He died in a nursing home with a brain tumor, age 78. I haven't heard his name for years, but boy,
After the tax-
talk about flashbacks.
After the tax evasion, he was arrested for threatening to kidnap a 4-year-old daughter of a lawyer in his bankruptcy case. He got 7 years in prison for that.
That was the second prison stand.
Oh, man.
He
Now, as a
was-
kid,
Oh, my
never
God.
knew his parents. I'm not making excuses.
Yep.
Thrown into an orphanage, did sex work on the street as a teenager in Philadelphia. But then one of his clients was the head of the Philadelphia Museum who set him up in the art world,
Yep.
and he flourished, mostly by cheating.
He had his ups and downs. But Andrew Crispo was a notorious figure in New
I
York
needed
City.
a shower after reading that obituary.
It's quite something. I was shocked to pick up a
right.
paper or whatever and read that he had died.
And even, should we go to international
Yes.
news? An even bigger monster is Hungary's Prime Minister Orban. We told you that he met with Trump. Well, he also, at Mar-a-Lago, he also went to D.C., didn't meet with administration officials. No, he went to the Heritage Foundation to plot the coup in 2025 of how they're together and they're all, copying
you're
each other's.
speculating.
The Heritage Foundation is adopting Hungary's policies, and
Yes.
they want them in the United
Project
States
2025,
to dismantle
yes.
democracy and put Christian nationalism in place. I don't know why they're allowed in the European Union or NATO for that matter. He's the total ally of Putin. Oh, by the way, I heard Putin won his election again.
And we're not allowed to say election. But as long as you mention Russia,
Yes.
one of the terrible stories that was covered quite extensively in the New York Times this week was about Russia brutalizing Ukrainian gay men.
And lesbians.
Yes. And what struck me about the story, what really impressed me was
The picture there, by the way, is of Alexei Polushkin.
the story went into some depth about the inability of the world to deal with LGBTQ human rights issues. And I thought that was a much more sophisticated look at it than we usually see in news coverage.
Well, that kid was like 22. He was kept in detention. This is after the Russians occupied Kherson. 64 days in detention, beat him repeatedly, publicly humiliated him, forced him to swallow pieces of the Ukrainian flag. He's one of 200 victims in a case against 7 Russians now in a Ukrainian court. These are, as they say, crimes against humanity.
And speaking of which, Gambia is working on repealing its no genital cutting of women law. The imams have come out and said, well, you know, this is against religion. God wants us to do genital mutilation. And so that is very much up for grabs and not looking good. But in Ghana, the Kill the Gays bill has been delayed. The Catholic bishops have just changed their point of view and decided they're against the bill. It's really all about, I think, the world funding coming to Ghana, and they're having some second thoughts.
In Greece, the Greek Orthodox Church is calling for excommunication of members of parliament who just enacted marriage equality. We exhort them to repent, the church said in a statement. On Corfu, they've already barring 2 lawmakers from the religious rights of the church. Greece's spiritual leader, Archbishop, called the new law pure evil and is pushing for a national referendum to overturn it. The polls in Greece have people supporting marriage equality narrowly. Well,
in the midst of all this, I was quite astonished to see a documentary this week that's opening next week, streaming online, particularly on Apple TV. You can pre-order it on Apple TV. It's called Transition. And it's about a guy who makes documentaries for the New York Times and others, Jordan Bryan, and he travels the world. Well, this is all about his going to Afghanistan, where he transitioned to, he's a trans male. He was transitioning while in Afghanistan, concealing his former female identity from the Taliban, who he was hanging out with for months and months. The opening shot is of him getting testosterone injections from a doctor in Afghanistan. And it's all about how he plays his identity in the midst of this, you know, incredibly homophobic, misogynist, violent population, some of whom turn out to be charming in this film when they're not.
Where can we see
killing
this?
People. You can see it online next week. It is becoming available March 26th, Apple TV and other streaming services. Transition, really fascinating, very tense, because you're wondering what's going to happen to this guy. I won't spoil what happens, but he goes through his whole transition in the midst of covering the Taliban. Transition.
Oh, okay. Another little transition here in Australia. Football's first out gay player there, Josh Cavallo, 24, proposed to his partner, Leighton Morrill, right there on the pitch at Adelaide United's home ground. Josh came out public in 2021. His club helped him set up this surprise proposal. Josh said, "You have provided a safe space in football, one that I never in my dreams believed possible."
Safe because there's no one in the stands?
Oh, no. Now.
Well, I'm wishing them the best. In France, the National Assembly has passed an apology and reparation payments to those convicted of same-sex sex from 1942 to 1982. It now has to go to the Senate for further approval, which is considered possible, not a sure thing. But we've been pursuing these kinds of apologies and reparations around the globe. In Canada, the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, is going to air a documentary next week, March 28th, hosted by non-binary comedian Mae Martin, Fluid, Life Beyond the Binary, about the science and nature of gender. Binary genders in nature is a myth, according to this. The nature of things is the series, and the episode is Fluid, Life Beyond the Binary.
Okay. And health news?
Just a couple more things here. Japan, the Sapporo High Court says the marriage ban in Japan is unconstitutional and must change now, but they can't order it. The legislature has to order it.
Well,
and as a
good luck.
transition to health news, In Paris at the Olympics this summer, they're expecting 14,000 athletes, staff, and press. They're going to make available 300,000 condoms.
They didn't do it at the pandemic games because they didn't want people to have sex.
Well, they're barring alcohol in the Olympic
Oh, they
Village.
always have.
Yeah.
So, in other health news, a Rutgers health study found lesbian, gay, bisexual women smoke more and are less likely to quit. Bisexual women, but not lesbian and gay women, were more likely to be receptive to marketing for cigarettes, cigars, e-cigarettes, and smokeless tobacco compared with heterosexual women. And gay men, but not bisexual men, were more receptive to cigar advertising. So, but their point is you need to do outreach specifically to these groups and get them to stop smoking.
One of our continuing topics on this show is the criminalization of people with HIV, and particularly for having sex. But while most we talk about are people we would not think should be charged or convicted, there is this guy in Argentina who's just been convicted of actually infecting 2 women. He removed condoms that they asked him to wear. This is this stealthing thing where men remove condoms in the middle of sex. It's
Well,
weird. He knew he was HIV positive. He apologized. He apologized after doing this and infecting them. He's been sentenced to 6 years in prison. The women are getting treatment, so they're in good shape.
well,
But
in Brazil, Bolsonaro has been charged with forging his vaccine certificate on COVID, and he has been arrested for that, yes?
good. I would love to see him end up in prison, but mostly for his political crimes.
Yes. Well, it's like Al Capone, tax evasion.
Yes, and Andrew Crispo. All right, entertainment news. Well, I was impressed by what Wayne Brady had to say on some red carpet somewhere. You know, he came out recently, we talked about him in the last few months, coming out as pansexual. And so those Hollywood press people, they're right on it. So here was Wayne Brady.
What do you feel like has been the biggest misconception about what it means to identify as pansexual? And a lot of people, that's a foreign term to them, even amongst, queer people. So for you, what has been like the biggest misconception as you've encountered people since you've come out?
I had to do research and find out what it was that I was. Yeah, I think the biggest misconception, and I even make a joke about it on stage tonight, is that people think that you're an indecisive bisexual. It's like, no. Let me set you straight. What the definition basically boils down to is regardless of gender. Regardless. So that means that I am happily free to fall in love with anybody here. If you're gay, if you're straight, if you're non-binary, trans, I don't care. It's the person, which in my mind is the ultimate in acceptance and loving. So I win.
You're here, let's make a deal. He is the host of Let's Make a Deal for those of you who don't follow those things.
Trans person on American Idol this year, Amari, sings kind of jazzy, made it to Hollywood, talks about how she lost family and friends when she came out as trans, but a very impressive person. I'll be following her through the competition, and we'll update you, or you can watch it yourself on Sunday nights,
All right.
I think on ABC.
After his dust-up with Elon Musk, Don Lemon announced that he has gotten a license to marry his longtime partner, New York realtor Tim Malone. No specific plans announced, but the license is only good for 60 days, so they got to do it, or not. They got engaged in 2019. Lemon was fired by,
CNN.
Yes, was fired by Musk, but he recently got a $25 million settlement from CNN, so he doesn't seem to be hurting.
Well, he was fired by CNN because he made some misogynist statements. And then Musk was going to give him a platform.
He loves misogynists.
At X. But he sat down for an interview with Lemon, and he didn't like the questions Lemon asked.
Don was asking a lot of hard questions of Musk, and Musk was like, what am I getting myself into? I hope you get a nice settlement from Elon Musk. I've heard he's pretty rich.
That would be nice. All right. Well, we told you at the top of the show about mourning Joan Gibbs, our friend and great constitutional lawyer. We showed you a little of her on this show some years ago.
And this other clip from the same show, when we were talking about same-sex marriage, she came in at the end to say, I want to raise some other issues.
Let's watch.
I think that also I would like to see people, some of the resource return to the focus on AIDS. And that's because, you know, the AIDS epidemic is not as in the epidemic proportions as it was, but it's from my understanding, according to my friends at ACT UP, who still exist, it's really young people, and particularly young Black and Latino people. So I would like to see some money and resources and time and energies devoted to that, as well as the problem of homelessness and lack of affordable housing, particularly here in New York City. I mean, because, and these are issues that are not unique to LGBT people, but they're actually working on them. We can get in coalitions with other groups, which I think we should do, and not just focus on all the issues that really just affect us. And I guess I wanted to say too, you know, having laws is great, but it's insufficient. And I'm here to tell you, as a Black person, where race discrimination has been prohibited under federal, state, local, Black association rules, right? And look.
And it hasn't been enough.
It hasn't been enough.
No,
so we have to do some. We have to think about strategies, ways, and short of dismantling the system, which is actually what I believe we should do. But we have to focus on that too, because laws alone don't change attitudes. They might make people, you know, temper their behavior, but they don't really in the long run.
That was a wonderful panel, and we will link to the whole thing in our email. You can get our emails by going to gayusatv.org.
Yeah. I really missed Joan. I also, this weekend, went to the memorial for Amber Hollibaugh, a great lesbian activist and theoretician. It went on and on for hours, and much loved, much missed. And next week on Monday the 25th is a huge memorial for David Mixner.
10 a.m. at St. Paul the Apostle Church on, I believe it's
West 59th and Columbus.
Columbus, yeah.
So, losing too many people these days, I guess we're at the age where we're losing our friends.
Also, but because these are people who, you know, came of age in the movement. I mean, you know, we didn't...
Yes, these are the sort of contemporary movement over the last 50 years, and now they're disappearing.
It's a long time.
Yeah. We need the rest of you to step up and take over.
Oh, the kids are. They really are.
Okay. Well, keep doing it. And go to gayusatv.org and sign up for our weekly newsletter, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Chris Cooper will be here.